transition to high school is a really complex process for some students. And this is shown in some research by a decline in academic outcomes, like around that Year 7 cohort. But the research has actually shown that why there might be a drop in the way they might perform academically, that they make this up with time. So that demonstrates that it can be a bumpy road for some students transitioning into school. In terms of how that fits with belonging, what we know is that students that come into school at Year 7 and students that leave school at Year 12 tend to do better at belonging than they do in the middle years. So this might be explained by transitional programs that are operating at Year 7, and then the bonding process that's occurring at Year 12 to celebrate their completion, and that perhaps in those middle years, say Year 9 and 10, that there's less strategies and interventions that are fostering belonging at those points. I did a meta-analysis looking at themes that fostered school belonging, and by meta-analysis what I did was essentially look at 588 peer-reviewed articles, or articles that had been reviewed in journals, and condensed what information these other studies had been saying, and I found that there were 6 core themes that fostered school belonging in schools. And these 6 themes included interpersonal characteristics, so characteristics from within yourself that are built up from personal character traits, like how academically motivated a student was, how engaged they are at school, how they perform. Also personal characteristics which included things like coping, resiliency, self-esteem and self-efficacy. And the third one was mental health as well. So the absence of mental illness, depression, anxiety and stress was also found to foster school belonging as well. Or the presence of mental illness had an impact, a negative impact on school belonging. Then there were three other major themes that emerged, and they were more intrapersonal, and they were more about the relationships that students have with people, and they were built up around teacher support, how much a teacher cares for a student, how approachable they are, how likeable they are to the student, parent support, how encouraging parents are of their children's academic endeavours and going to school, and peer support as well, how young people feel valued by their peers and accepted. School belonging is essential for social and academic outcomes. In the literature, it's been shown to foster academic motivation, academic outcomes, and wellbeing variables like life satisfaction, happiness, and general coping and resiliency skills, including transition into adulthood. It's also been found to be negatively associated with behaviours that aren't that conducive to accessing education, like absenteeism, school dropout rates, alcohol and tobacco use as well. So by fostering school belonging, we're looking at the whole child and their access to education. When students don't belong, the research clearly shows that they're at greater risk of mental health concerns like depression and anxiety, and also from dropping out of school. So that we've got some not accessing school at all. And at the moment we're looking at statistics that suggest that 26% of our young people are reporting symptoms of mental illness, and that's almost a quarter of our young people. So this, needs to be on the agenda as an important strategy for fostering wellbeing in young people. In terms of strategies that parents and schools could implement to foster school belonging, it's in my research, a key finding was the relationship between the student and the teacher. So it's absolutely imperative that schools focus on the student-teacher relationship, and sometimes this relationship can be undermined because it's naturally occurring, or it might seem simple, but it's a relationship, and like all relationships, it takes work. So, it's really important that teachers know their students, that they provide academic support as well as social support, and they're approachable and likeable. And so that teacher relationship was a key finding. The other thing schools can do are foster those personal characteristics around building self-esteem and building self-efficacy, and coping and resiliency. Also equipping students with knowledge of the help-seeking resources that are in the school so that they can access and gain help when they need it. In terms of parents fostering school belonging for their children, parents could be encouraging of attending school. This is sometimes not always the case. Parents who value education, what we know about them is that their children are more likely to have a greater sense of belonging to their school because they have that modelled by their parents. Schools could also look at meaningful ways that parents can become involved at school. In the primary school setting or in the junior years, we see parents involved in the classroom. They might come in and teach groups, but that those meaningful, natural ways of parents engaging in schools tend to drop off in the senior years. So perhaps schools that are focused at senior level could look at ways that parents can become more involved. I also looked at a sample of 308 schools in Victoria, and I looked at their school vision and mission statements, and I wanted to have a look at what themes they had discussed and what themes they had endorsed to see where school belonging was as a priority. And surprisingly, school belonging was within the top 3 themes. Academic motivation or academic outcomes was number 1. Mental health promotion was number 2, and then surprisingly we had school belonging at number 3. So school belonging is on the radar for schools, so we just need to make sure that what they're espousing in their vision and mission statements is being reflected in their day-to-day practice. Because the other thing that emerged from my research was that there wasn't a lot of guidelines available to schools on how to foster school belonging. So we need to acknowledge that there might be a bit of a research practice gap